Welcome to Welcome to First Class Fantasy. I'm Theo Gremminger, and I'm joined as always by Billy Muzio. And we're joined by not one, but two awesome guests this week. And the first guest is new to Player Profiler in terms of you haven't seen him on a podcast yet. You haven't heard him. You haven't seen him on YouTube. And he's new to the team here, but we're doing a very cool partnership with one of the best fantasy football injury analysts in the entire sphere, in my opinion, in Dr. Deepak Chona. We made an announcement on Twitter. This is, we're happy to say this is the first podcast that Dr. Chona has been on among all of our podcasts, but you're going to see him a lot this summer in some written content, some social media content. You're really doing some awesome stuff. Deepak, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what your website is and about the partnership that we're going to have with each other?
Yeah, thank you for that really kind intro. I'm really excited, like you, for this summer and this whole season. So my team is called Sports Med Analytics, and my own background is in orthopedic sports surgery. So I was a resident in California at Stanford back in 2020, and COVID gave me a little bit of time to sort of explore some technology interests, and I teamed up with some folks who had backgrounds in computer pulling data and machine learning. So we took their expertise and then my sort of clinical and medical background and combined it all. And what we have is now mostly featured on a website, sportsmedanalytics.com, but also on social media. And now we're lucky to be interacting with teams like yours. So we look forward at players who get injured. We say, we do analyze their videos during the season and see how their injury looks. But most importantly, what we do is project their returns, their timelines, how likely are they to be 100%, 80%, that sort of thing. And we do it all from a data-driven approach, and we think that's really the key to all of this. There are a number of injury analysts out there, and I think they have certain strengths and value, but we consider ours being that algorithmic approach to doing this, and it's helped us win over the past few years a lot of our own fantasy football leagues. But most importantly, it's been a ton of fun, and we've seen a lot of good growth and collaborations stem out of this. So we're excited to be joining up with y'all and looking forward to seeing what happens from here.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that stands out when looking at your work is a lot of times when we see any kind of injury, it's this gloom and doom, or it's this pushed aside as not a big deal. It's a lot of bombastic, quick reactions. And I think there's so much reactionary movement. Like Billy and I, we draft every day almost at this time of the year, and you'll see some guys avoiding guys or some guys, just brushing off these concerns. But I think, Deepak, just, I can encourage everyone to follow you on Twitter because I think you do a very good job of explaining things in a very rational way that is very impactful and actionable for our fantasy takes. And that's what stood out to me the most when we entered this partnership. So a big hat tip to you. Billy and I have a number of players we really want to pick your brain on. But first, we want to hear from our sponsors.
Hey, people always ask me, what's the World Series of Fantasy? What's the Super Bowl of Fantasy? And it's easy. It's the FFPC. Their signature Players Championship has a $6 million prize pool, and their best ball leagues start in February. And they're the answer to so many questions. Hey, what's the best place to get a Dynasty Orphan? Well, you can adopt a Dynasty Orphan at the FFPC right now. There's more orphans at the FFPC than anywhere else on the internet. That's why we partner with them. So if you want to play fantasy football for low, medium, high stakes, you love Dynasty, you love best ball, you love seasonal leagues, all types of fantasy footballers need to go to the FFPC. And remember, use promo code Underworld. Promo code Underworld gets you $25 off your first team. Promo code Underworld, $25 off your first team, no matter what the format is, at the FFPC. Go get it.
Welcome back to First Class Fantasy. Billy, we're going to be in Vegas. We're actually roommates now, Billy. This is going to be super cool. We booked a dope suite. We're not going to tell you the hotel, but we'll be around these live drafts. And Billy and I, we're trying to make some money, Deepak. So this is really important for us to kind of pick your brain on a couple of guys. I think there's some really hot button players right now, and a lot of them happen to play the running back position. So we already see the running back position being beat up. Guys are avoiding running backs. We're drafting wide receivers en masse. People are pushing quarterbacks up the board. And there's some real polarization at the running back spot in general. Now you throw this monkey wrench into the mix with guys doing, injured or potentially holding out. It's a little bit of a mix. But the one guy that I think is very polarizing is Breece Hall. Breece Hall is right now kind of a litmus test for risk tolerance, optimism versus pessimism. And Billy, his ADP right now is right there in like a very impactful range where he's right and let's call it the 3-4 turn. Some drafts he sneaks in the third round, some drafts he's there in the early fourth, but he's rarely goes later, rarely goes much earlier. Deepak, how should we be treating Breece Hall?
Yeah, it's very much a personal question of risk tolerance here. Now, with Breece Hall coming off the ACL, the average ACL for a young running back takes about 10 months. And that's right about where he'll be post-op and when week one rolls around. So we do factor in a lot of variables, but our machine learning tells us about a 60% chance that he is active week one. So on the other side of that, 40% he doesn't play yet. We wouldn't be surprised to see him ramping up over the course of about 3 games is usually what young running backs coming off of knee surgery average to get their touches sort of back to full. And then the other question is about productivity and efficiency. What is he going to do with those touches? And that there's a bit of a question mark there, but we look to the algorithms, we look to the data to solve it. So with Breece Hall specifically, there are 3 factors that help sort of soften the blow of that post ACL dip. And those are being young. He was 21 at the time of injury. He was a high draft pick, which is also an important factor. And the third, and probably the most important, at least in our correlations, is his pre-injury athletic metrics. Now, Breece Hall rates as a 95th percentile performer for the running back position per his NFL Combine stats. And that's really one of the main keys, but together all 3 of those factors predict that Breece Hall fits the analytics mold for the type of guy who comes back strong from his ACL. Now, with that being said, our data is predicting him to be around 85% for week one, and that's 85%. You could call it explosiveness or efficiency, but then that's on top of the limited workload that he's likely to see early on. Now, if you're looking at how his progression projects, by about week 6, we have him at 90%. And at that point, we would call him an RB1, a true star running back. And by end of season, you're really looking probably at very similar to what we were seeing last year. The one other key factor with all of this is that running backs, when they come back from the ACL, there's about a 6-week period where they have a higher rate of minor injuries, and those are things like hamstring strains. You saw Gus Edwards had this last year, and it's unfortunately just the reality of being a little bit out of the game for a while. And those are kind of all the factors to consider. So it's a little bit of a high risk, high reward. For me, probably round 4 is where I start to pull that trigger. Round 3, I probably pass. But it's a very personal decision based on all of that data.
Bill, we're seeing his straight line speed right now hitting 22 plus miles an hour. I know the concern with running backs in this injury is the lateral movement. How do you feel about his lateral movement early in the season? We already know based upon everything you said is that we're probably going to see him limited up until the first few weeks. Do you think they limit his lateral runs as well? Is he be running more up the middle? What's your take on his maybe usage and play calling?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And you're exactly right. The straight line speed is less affected from the ACL. It's specifically planting and cutting off of that leg and going the other way. And you can't really limit that, I would say, in an NFL game. Yeah. And if you feel that, as on the medical side, if you feel that a player needs that to be limited, then I wouldn't clear him to start. And once you clear him, you're really saying he can do all the movements, but it's the question of like how explosive will he be when he does that. And I think that's where you're going to see the impact just on those cutting movements. And that's where, for a guy like him, he's not a power runner per se. He's more of that explosive cutter. So that's why I think you are going to see some difference early on.
Let's pivot off of Breece Hall. Let's go with Ken Walker. Ken Walker has been, since the NFL draft, one of the biggest fallers in terms of ADP. This is a guy that was a potential second-round draft pick. Then the Zach Charbonnet selection has propelled him down. Now we have injury concerns. Billy, we're starting to see a little bit of sixth-round Walker. He's smack dab ADP-wise in the back end of the fifth round. A guy that really performed well last year. How worried are you about him right now, Deepak?
Overall, not that worried. And I think probably I would say the legitimate concern for him initially was they called this a groin strain. They kept him out of practice. He previously had a hernia surgery, which is right in the same area. So the concern was, is the repair disrupted and does he need to go in for another one? And that would cost him somewhere around 8 weeks. Now, at this point, it's about 2 to 3 weeks since that injury occurred in the first place. If he needed surgery, he would have had it already, and in most likelihood. And then now we look at how these groin strains, these non-operative groin strains are usually managed. In the preseason, you can almost take like a grade 1 in the regular season, which is like a 1 to 2 week injury, and bump it up one. So meaning it would be handled like a grade 2 of the regular season. So I would expect even a small injury to be a 3 to 4 week issue in the case of Ken Walker. And is what it sounds like. They have him back to running, which again suggests it was like a grade 1 injury. He's not yet doing lateral cutting, which is the key with this, but my anticipation is within the next 2 weeks, we start seeing that. And then somewhere in the next 2 to 3 weeks, he's probably back on the field. The recurrence rate of these is also part of an issue. If you rush a player back, that increases the recurrence risk. So that's really the reason why they're taking it slow. And you have the time, so you might as well. Once the season starts, I expect him to be 100%. I expect that recurrence rate to be hovering around 15%, which is about a little higher than the league baseline, but not extremely high. And in most likely outcome here, you're seeing very little impact of this injury once the season starts.
Theo, I got one thing to say about all that.
Amen to that shit.
Billy, are you starting to look at him as a guy where he's falling to a point where risk reward in on Walker?
Yeah, I've been in on Walker. Did not like it when he was going around 2 prior to the draft.
No, we hated that. We
loved where he was going after the draft and Zach Charbonnet was added. We were getting pretty consistently round 4 Walker. He'd slipped around 5 at times, as you mentioned. We're starting to see back in round 5, early round 6 Walker. I've been taking the gamble pretty much anywhere in round 5. Honestly, didn't he, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Deepak, didn't he have a groin issue last year as well? And I forget the exact diagnosis of that, but it was more severe and it actually strayed me away from him inside of draft rooms. And I mean, he literally did beat me at times down the stretch. I don't want to be wrong on him twice with a groin injury. And it seems to be that he has been good at getting his body prepped and ready to get back on the field and is taking care of it. Some athletes, we see that when they get injured, they consistently get re-injured or they have, other injuries as well. How concerned are you with him in that regard? Can the groin injury lead to other injuries or is it a non-factor?
It can. It's a really good question. And your logic is exactly right. He had a groin issue last year, and that was sort of a severe groin, if you will, in the sense that it was a hernia that needed surgery. And that's why he missed a few weeks at the beginning of last year. But at this point, it's all about how long he has to recover. So if this were in season, they'd probably be trying to rush him back a little bit, and the recurrence rate would be higher. And then if he has a tight groin, you can imagine that maybe a hamstring or a calf is compensating a little bit, and you can get injuries that way too. In this case, given the amount of time he had from the injury itself to the start of week 1, and the fact that they're taking it slow so far, really suggests that he will be pretty much fully healed. So I'm not overly concerned about it causing those issues, but it's a very valid concern. And if we start seeing these in a couple weeks, then yes, I think those could linger into the season.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
One player that we're really seeing falling, especially in some of these high stakes drafts, is J.K. Dobbins. Billy, Andrew Schellenberg got him in the 7th round of a slow main event today. Shout out to Andrew Schellenberg of the GOAT District. J.K. Dobbins has played 23 regular season games in his career, Deepak, and now we're seeing him miss more time in the preseason. How worried are you about Dobbins, or is he a fantastic value right now?
I would lean towards the second option. So the value for sure. He's one guy who it's a little unclear contract versus injury for the holdout, but we look at his injury. So he had a multi-ligament knee surgery, which is basically about as big of an injury as running backs face and come back from. That production dip was projected to last somewhere in the 19 to 22 month range for J.K. Dobbins based on prior data. And he's now well past that. And in fact, at month 19, he was at the last 5 games of the year, he was averaging 100 yards per game, 6.5 yards per carry. So it looked there that he was past that issue. He did have a second surgery last year, and that's kind of what kept him out. Having that sort of issue is not super uncommon with this injury, but having needing a third surgery for the same issue would be relatively uncommon here. So for those reasons, I'm relatively reassured on J.K. Dobbins. I don't love that we're not seeing him out there right now, but as you mentioned, it's a little bit uncertain how much of that is really injury to begin with, and we don't really have evidence to say that it is. So I would lean towards him being a value.
Love that. I mean, I think Billy when he drops to that 7th round, it's almost a smash for me because it's very difficult to find running backs in that range of the draft that could have double-digit touchdowns. And based on the quality of the Baltimore offense, I think that's in the range of outcomes.
Yeah, we even saw him last year, which was just after the knee injury. Still have some of the most explosive runs in the NFL, and his breakaway run rate. We saw that hitch in his step, but he still had a exceptionally high breakaway run rate. And now he's another year removed. I've been taking the gamble in round 7. Statistics say from those knee injuries, and again, correct me if I'm wrong here, Deepak, we've only had 2 in the last 20 years who have been top 20 running backs at the position in fantasy points per game following an ACL injury. Is that correct?
The statistics on those are pretty limited. I don't know the number offhand, but his is a little bit different. His is like the Javonte Williams injury, that it's ACL plus an outside ligament called the LCL. And then with that, there's some structures in between that get torn and reconstructed as part of the surgery as well. But I would consider him that injury in a different sort of class than like the Breece Hall or Saquon Barkley ACL.
Smash the like, everyone, because Deepak is just dropping fire. We have another guest in the background right now, so I'm going to go to a lightning round here. And if anybody likes this sort of conversation, the sort of conversation that actually helps us crush fantasy leagues, make sure and tune in on Monday, where Deepak will be joining Matt Kelly on a special top 10 takeaways injury edition, where he's going to go into a lot more depth than he's doing here on First Class Fantasy. That is going to be a lot of fun to listen to. Let's go lightning round. You tell me if we're in or out. Are you in or out on Cooper Kupp right now?
I'm out on Cooper Kupp. The hamstring has a 15% recurrence rate, and then Matt Stafford's going to be dependent on his O-line, and they project pretty poorly. So he's a high injury risk for the year, which makes me out on Cooper Kupp as a round 1 guy.
That is big time stuff. Out on Cooper Kupp. And just curious, does age play a factor into that? An older player with this sort of injury you treat differently?
It does. The older players, 30 specifically and above, have a higher recurrence rate with the hamstrings. So, it's less of an issue for week 1, but there is some risk there. And then the Stafford risk on top. And they're just, to me, better options at round 1.
We've seen Joe Burrow flipped by Justin Herbert, Billy. It's happened in a lot of these FFPC main events. Are we in or out on Joe Burrow now that he's going, at a slightly lower range in the draft? You're able to get him, easily in the 4th round, and now you're starting to see him in the 5th. In or out?
I'm in on Joe Burrow. He's likely ready week 1. There's a relatively low recurrence rate that far out. And so far, everything we've seen suggests a low severity strain.
You're making the chat very depressed with your Cooper Kupp comment. We'll pour one out, guys. That's not what you wanted to hear. But guys, and Frank Castle, the Punisher himself, is very upset about this. Let's end it on this one. Jonathan Taylor. Is the Jonathan Taylor injury something that worries you? The Jonathan Taylor camp seems to be saying that he's not injured. The team is kind of pushing it there. Where are you at?
I would lean towards not being injured. He had a relatively straightforward ankle surgery. Long-term results on that are variable, but the short-term is usually pretty good. So you would think that at this point he'd be ready to go from there. And he denied the back issue, so I can't really argue with that. The one issue with Jonathan Taylor, high ratio of carries to receptions. And for running back, you kind of want it to be flipped to lower their injury rate. A reception is a lower injury risk per play. So that's one thing that keeps me out on Jonathan Taylor, but not because of a current injury.
All right, we got one more. We can't not talk about Javonte. So let's give me in or out on Javonte.
Yeah, at ADP, I would say in, but overall, I would say first half of the year, I'm not planning on starting him. Low efficiency, up to like 20% dips is usually what you see with this. And this was the J.K. Dobbins injury last year that has a lot of complications in some cases, although he does seem to be on track.
Don't bother drafting him, FFPC drafters, because I have an 8th round Javonte Williams FFPC main event share. It's pointless. You're not going to catch me on that one. My team ran Super Purity as well. So this was awesome. Dr. Deepak Chona, let everybody know where they can find you.
Absolutely. So I am on Twitter at SportMDAnalysis, also www.sportsmedanalytics.com, and we'll be on Player Profiler all season long. So we're pumped to be joining y'all. Thank you very much for having me.
And look for Monday's top 10 takeaways with the Podfather himself and Deepak. It's going to be awesome. They're going to dive into a lot of players, go into more in-depth, and we might have to tell Matt to lead off the show with Cooper Kupp, because that one is one that Matt's going to really want to pick your brain on. Thanks so much for joining us. Everybody stick around. We have one of our favorite analysts in all of fantasy, Andrew Cooper. He's going to be joining us after another word from our sponsors.
All right. See you guys.
Thank you.
Hey, we're all starting new fantasy leagues all the time. And more often than not, where do we start our fantasy leagues at Player Profiler? On Sleeper. Because it's the best. You can imagine my excitement when I saw Sleeper rolled out Sleeper picks, baby. Now, you know I love Kenny Pickett, right? Week 1, who does he face? San Francisco. That's a bummer. So I'm going to be going less than on Kenny Pickett's projected yardage and on whichever quarterback is starting for San Francisco in week 1. Probably not Trey Lance. But then, who do the Steelers face in week 2? The Browns, right? We think the Browns are going to crank things up. So there, you can say, hey, Kenny Pickett, more than his projected passing yards. And you keep on correlating. Elijah Moore, more than. George Pickens, more than. And if you pick up to 8, that's how you 100x your payout on Sleeper. It's called the Hail Mary. So if you use promo code Underworld, you get a $100 instant deposit match. Check out Sleeper's terms and conditions for details. These Sleeper picks are live in over 25 states. Yeah, buddy.
Cooper.
Well.
And look at my boy Billy Muzio, how slick he was with the overlay switch.
Yeah, that was smooth. That was professional grade.
Incredible. One of our favorite guys in fantasy, Andrew Cooper of Fantasy Alarm, joins us. Coop, you're dropping fire. Why don't you let everybody know some of the stuff you've been dropping at Fantasy Alarm, some of the podcasts? Highly recommend all of your work.
Wait, you guys don't want to keep talking about serious groin injuries?
We're not going to ask you about injuries. We've reached the point where we've got a lot of that. We're leaving a little gas in the tank for Monday, but I will pick your brain on a couple of those.
You know what's funny? I actually did just drop an article about injuries just now, dude. So perfect timing.
Biggest injury for you is sleep at night with the baby.
Oh my goodness, man. You're preaching to the choir, dude. I'm just like, I'm in like permanent, like weird sleepover mode where you just stay up all the time and everything's like a hallucination. Like, so this should be a good show. We're having a good time with the voice.
How is the caffeine? The caffeine content is way up in the Cooper household, I'd imagine.
So for my wife, it's 0 because she's got to breastfeed the baby.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's not necessarily up, but the times that I'm having it have changed drastically. Like typically you drink coffee in the morning, right? Well, now you just drink it whenever the hell you feel like it, right?
Yeah.
Also, I will say that video game playing is up, because you can just kind of throw the baby right on here and play a little bit. So that's a nice positive.
That's a very nice positive.
Yeah, and I've got more time to think about ball. So I did just drop an injury article. Then that one's free. You can check that out. And I'm not getting into the machine learning and stuff that Deepak got into. That was fascinating. But what I'm talking about is how to when and where to utilize that information, and not just about predicting healthy guys to get hurt versus the idea of fading guys who are currently hurt, but also I get into a bit of the idea of accounting for injuries. And historically, we only do that with running backs. But I looked at a couple players and brought up the idea of like let's say Travis Kelce, right? If a wide receiver gets hurt, it doesn't really increase his upside, right? He's still the top target. He's still the dude. No, Sky Moore injury doesn't help Travis Kelce. But you look at a guy like Dallas Goedert, he's very safe. But if one of those wide receivers gets hurt, now he has a chance for serious high-end upside, right? So he's almost like a double handcuff plus because either wide receiver getting hurt. So the article gets into a little bit of that of don't predict injuries, but there are places where you can account for them. That's on fantasyalarm.com right now. Just type in Andrew Cooper Fantasy Alarm and you can see everything I write.
I love that. I love the contingent upside. And there's a question in the chat. What are you a FIFA guy? What's your game?
So it depends the situation, right? Like I really own my favorite game is NHL. I'm filthy in NHL, dude. Don't bring that smoke up in
I
here.
will not.
But the game that I've been playing right now, it's on so far. I never
Hello
get to
Kitty
play.
Island Adventure.
That's exactly it, dude. How did you know, bro? I just collected all the Paw Stones. I'm about to build the Hello Kitty Megatron. No, the game. I'm so far behind because we do this all the time. You guys know, right when we log off here, we just start doing something else for fantasy. So I'm so far behind. I'm playing Fallout 4. I was like, what game can I play where it's not online? I'm not going to be throwing my controller through the screen, and I can just kind of wander around and do stuff. So that's the game I'm playing right now.
I only play one video game. I used to play a lot more, but time just doesn't allow for it. The only game I play is League of Legends now. I've played it since season 2. The
most aggressive, like insane game you can play. You only play one game. It's the most psychotic game you could possibly play, right?
I was a big FIFA guy for many years. FIFA I was really into, was almost obsessive, and kid number 3 kind of crushed the video games because now my kids are older. So I have 3 kids now, and it's I never have an opportunity for it. So it's
you got to get them on the Xbox, man. That's it.
Are
they old enough yet?
So that when your kids get a little older, the thing is Roblox. Roblox is this obsession. My daughter, my son play it. Everybody plays it. They interact with their friends on Roblox. It's hard to explain, but if you know, you know. Let's dive in a little bit. So. We always talk about tight ends with Kupp. Kupp is like the man for tight ends, but we're only going to pick your brain on one or two. Okay. We're going to show your other talents today, but I really got to pick your brain on one tight end in particular, and that's Darren Waller. Billy and I have been on Waller for months, and you're starting to see him really creep up. I took him in the 4th round of an FFPC Fantasy Pros Championship. And then this past week, Billy, I've seen him go in 3 separate FFPC main events in the 3rd round. He's starting to really separate. We saw Kupp. It's like he's just been taking scalps. First, it was Goddard. He leaped Goddard. And it was first he was neck and neck with Goddard. Waller passed Goddard. That was predictable. Now he's past George Kittle. He's past Kyle Pitts. And now he's still a gap between him and Hawkinson. But I think that's going to be a conversation by the end of the month for certain drafters. Where are you at on Darren Waller now that the ADP has corrected so much?
But that's what happens. I drop my tight end series, and everyone's just like tearing up their rankings. Really, the ADP goes out the window. No, now, I don't think I'm moving the needle like that. But I've had Waller personally ranked as tight end 3 for a while now, and it's because of two things. One, I'm highly confident in my ability to find breakouts at the position. So if I'm going to spend a high end pick, I need them to have difference making upside. When I talk about difference making upside, I'm not even talking about just guys that are top 5 or 6. I'm talking about all-time seasons. And if you look at the top like 50 or so all-time seasons, very few of those guys weren't number 1 or 2 on their team in targets. Surprisingly, the guy that had the best tight end season all time actually didn't lead his team in targets that year. It was Rob Gronkowski, scored 18 touchdowns, but Wes Welker had like 170 targets that year. So all you have to be is top 2. Waller, I think, can lead his team in targets. So I'm looking at Kelsey, I'm looking at Andrews. Right when those guys are gone, I'm looking at Waller. Because Hawkinson, for me, I'm a little worried about Addison coming in. I know he's going to be fairly safe, but that's the case. With Goddard, when everyone was healthy, it was 8 targets a game for A.J. Brown. It was 7.7 for Devonta Smith, and it was 5.6 for Goddard. I've yet to find one person that flat out projects Goddard to get more targets than one of those 2 players. And if that's how you have them ranked, then you're almost betting against yourself by picking that player. So with me, Goddard, Kittle, just like you're saying, it's kind of going that way. I'm not going there, right? Pitts is a guy, it's high risk, high reward. But again, we don't know if that team's actually going to throw higher than the leather helmet level they've been throwing. Like last year, people, because of how few times the Bears threw the ball, I don't think people realize that the Falcons also threw the fewest passes per game of any team since the Jets in 2009, which 2009 is a long time ago.
So one great question in the chat is about how Daniel Jones essentially meshes with Darren Waller. I personally think that this is a match made in heaven based on him being a low ADOT guy. I know Billy's talked about this correlation as well, but curious your thoughts on Daniel Jones and Waller and what it kind of does to his target ceiling. And Billy, I'd like you to kind of share what you're projecting him for as well.
Well, I'll tell you what. Did you want Billy to go first?
No, let's go. Let's go Billy
first.
on this one.
Yeah, that's right, Billy.
Okay, let's go.
Let's go
Kupp on this.
In person.
Say something nice about me, Billy, and then I'll say my take.
Wait till we get off the show. He'll be like this Kupp guy. I can't believe it.
Unbelievable. But you have to be nice to me because I'm the guest. So right. So here's the situation. I don't really like to slander other players as part of my takes, but when you look around, you've got Jalen Hyatt, who's a rookie, and I expect him to be more of an high A field stretcher type. You've got Wandale Robinson, who I like, but he's coming off a knee injury, right? Deepak just kind of told us how there's a little bit of risk coming in with that. And if you look at Isaiah Hodgins, he basically had 2 good games, and they're both versus the Vikings and Pat Peterson. And when you look at the other games, not great. I mean, look at that game, the playoff game versus the Eagles when he faced real corners, vaporized. So a guy like Daniel Jones, that past few years, he's thrown 10, 12, 15 touchdowns max. Darren Waller, not only can he be a top target on the team, but if you go ahead and look at every tight end in terms of end zone targets per game, number 1, George Kittle. He had 11 touchdowns. He was number 1, and number 2 is Darren Waller. So I think he could step in and not only be the top target for Daniel Jones, but also the end zone target. And these guys, I mean, it's like every time someone puts a microphone in front of them, they have something nice to say about the other one. You've been seeing it, right? It's like just rave reviews, left back and forth. It's like a game of tennis of compliments, right? Just like me and Billy on.
There's a wonderful picture of Dable and Waller, just a bromance going on. This is like, I'm going to get you 140 targets. That's like the meme.
It's almost too good though. Yeah, like when you start hearing like the dream team stuff, it gets a little scary. It's almost like.
But Andrew, I think before Billy shares his stats, it's how many tight ends are going to get 100 targets period this year. You could usually count it on one hand. So you're a target ceiling for Waller. I'm not doing the extensive kind of projections that Billy is, but I see him as kind of a 130 target guy, which is just, you don't find those guys.
All you need in this world is either 90 targets or 10 plus touchdowns. And the touchdowns, we all agree, are very difficult to predict. Kelsey only has like 2 seasons with double digit touchdowns. But going back to 2003, it was Randy McMichael in 2003. He was the last tight end to finish top 5 without either 10 touchdowns or 90 plus targets in PPR.
Say that one again, Andrew. Randy McMichael, what year?
Randy McMichael in 2003. Since then, no tight end has finished top 5 in PPR without 90 targets or 10 touchdowns. And I'll tell you this, in half PPR, there's only one exception. It was COVID year. Mark Andrews missed 2 games and finished with 88 targets. I count that up. That ruined my stat, and it should count. That I'm saying that should be stricken from the record. That year was garbage.
No,
so
it's all out the window now.
It's all out the window, man. Yeah, so there were only four tight ends last year that led their team in targets. It was Waller, Kelsey, Cole Kmet, and Billy, your guy. That you've convinced me that he's growing on me a little bit. Your guy Tyler Higbee. Mm-hmm. He quietly also had 100 targets, but not a lot of guys top 2 on their team, and definitely not a lot of guys leading their team in targets. So Waller, he fits a lot of those criteria.
Yeah, Waller for me is the clear-cut number 1 inside of the passing, volume here for the Giants. Theo, you said 130 targets. That number would be hard to hit simply because the Giants just don't throw the ball all that much, and it's a lot of targets. The algorithm, the projections in my model are saying about 555 attempts. 130 would be roughly 24%, which would be an astronomical amount for a tight end. That being said, inside the projections, I do have him for 20%, which is about 110 targets inside of this offense. And there's not very many people that we can, comfortably say are going to see 100 targets. I think off the top of my head, without diving into the numbers, you can say Hawkinson if he doesn't hold in. You can say Mark Andrews. You can say Kelsey. You might be able to say Pitts. And then from there, it kind of tapers off pretty drastically. Higbee is probably in the conversation, and I think that's about it. It starts kind of falling downhill to like the 90s and 80s pretty quickly after Waller. There's just not a lot of target competition for Waller when you look at the rest of this offense. And a lot of these wide receivers, I mean, they have 15 receivers, I think, to date that are actually on this roster right now. And of course, we don't expect them all to make the team, but just shows you kind of the incompetence at the position and maybe the lack of confidence that they have inside of this receiving core. One, whether it be health related, 2, whether it be talent related. But, I don't think the likes of Cole Beasley or, Darius Slayton or Wanda Robinson are going to eat into Waller's target share that much when they're all healthy. When Wandell's healthy, when Sterling Shepard is healthy, this is where it starts to get a little bit more interesting. But depending upon how well that chemistry kind of develops early in the season will be a big tell for Waller as the season progresses. If they struggle a little bit and they start getting guys back, I could see where a scenario where Waller might be, overvalued. But I don't think that's the likely outcome. I think that he's going to dominate the touches early in the season. They're going to get that chemistry. They're going to hold on to that rhythm, and they're going to continue that through the season, even once they start getting more of these weapons back. And it'll just open up the field more for him. Waller is my tight end 4 in my season projections. He passed Kittle on the last update. They're within a couple fantasy points prior. And it just broke down to 1, the amount of touches that we're going to see for Darren Waller, and 2, the touchdown variance from George Kittle and some due regression. And I just don't think that I don't like banking on touchdowns when we're doing projections.
Yeah. Let me throw one more thing in there for Kittle and Goddard. This is how I would handle them. I hear a lot of people coming to me and saying, Brock Purdy loves George Kittle. He's going to throw him a bunch of touchdowns, right? Well, he scored 11 last year. Vegas has him set at 5.5. Yeah. So if you think we're going to see the same thing, that's where you make that play. Don't make the play with your season-long fantasy team. Go just bet the over on 5.5. Do you know what Dallas Goedert said at over/under touchdown?
Dallas Goedert, I'm going to say 6.5.
3.5.
Oh my God.
Every book. I swear. I put money on it. I don't even like the guy really, but I bet on the over, and I'm just not going to draft him. But 3.5 is where he's set. And I went and looked at it. I was like, why is this? Over the last 3 years, Dallas Goedert has only 8 end zone targets. Mike Gesicki last year got 8. Mike Gesicki in his 35% snap share got 8 end zone targets. Dallas Goedert last year had 2. The year before that, he had 2. The year before that, he had 4. He gets a ton of screen passes, which is great in your PPR leagues, but he's really not a focal point of that team in the end zone. I'm willing to bet on over 3.5 because I believe that's ridiculous. But this is also a guy who, we talk about injury prone with Waller. People say, oh, he's injury prone, he's going to get hurt. I mean, Dallas Goedert hasn't played a full season in 4 years. George Kittle is hurt every year. Like, if you're going to start fading these guys for injuries, then you're fading everybody. Everybody that isn't Travis Kelce.
I love it. I think that it makes me really not want to draft Goddard when I hear that total. That really hurts a lot. Let's talk about Mark Andrews really quickly, because Billy's got him tight end 2. I've got him tight end 2. I'm guessing you have him tight end 2, Kupp, right?
I have his own tier. Tier 2 is just Mark Andrews. So
we're seeing Mark Andrews start to move up and up and up in FFPC higher stakes drafts. I've seen a very common thing recently is pushing Mark Andrews to the end of the first round in tight end premium, because he's kind of, like you said, in his own tier. Where do you see him this year in terms of his impactfulness? How close can he get to Travis Kelce? Is he a real threat for tight end 1 overall without an injury to Kelce?
Now, the difference between these two players and why you can't put them in the same tier is uncertainty. And with our top picks, we want certainty. Later on, we lean into uncertainty. And Don F in the chat is asking the right questions. Dalton Schultz, 100 targets. Why can't he be a top 2 target on that team? So later on, we lean into uncertainty. That's the game. Early on, we want certainty. We want Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill. Like, for years there, you just knew those were the guys, and you just pick them and everything's good. And now it's still Kelce's, everything's the same. With Mark Andrews, the upside is now higher and the floor is now lower. It's as simple as that. The upside is higher because Greg Roman's gone, and Greg Roman stinks. He doesn't stink. I'm sure he's a great guy, but I don't want guys like Arthur Smith.
Are you so sure about that? A guy who has moved that slow, he might be a really boring guy.
He might be, yeah. I mean, like him, Arthur Smith and Greg Roman, they want to run the ball 1 trillion times, and it's horrible for fantasy football. It truly is. So this team, the Ravens, have been bottom 5 in pass attempts every year except one. The one time they threw the ball like a normal team, Mark Andrews had a top 5 season of all time. Top 5 fantasy season of all time in that season, 2021. And then they just went back to running it every play. So you have the upside now with Greg Roman and his air raid offense. The reason the floor is lower is not just the uncertainty of a new coach coming in, but they're changing everything up. What we liked before is that they would use Nick Boyle and they would use the fullback Patrick Ricard on so many snaps. Patrick Ricard played more than 50% of the snaps last year. Bonkers, right? So when you have a guy like that isn't soaking up targets, the targets get highly consolidated among the top 2 guys. That's how you can have the offense with 150 targets for Marquise Brown and 150 for Mark Andrews. They took Patrick Ricard, and the reports from camp are that he's playing offensive line. The fullback position is gone. He's working out with the lineman. He's going to be like a inline tight end. So you're going to see 3 wide receiver sets from the Ravens. Can you believe it, Billy? Like they're going to have 3 wide receivers out there, and it's going to be Zay Jones and Odell and Bateman for as long as those guys can all stay healthy, and that creates the lower floor. But I'm willing to chase the upside. Theo, do you have Mark Andrews tight end 2?
Absolutely, and I think that if there's somebody we would bet on to finish as tight end 1 that's not Kelce, it's because Mark Andrews scored a ton of touchdowns. We talked about J.K. Dobbins earlier with Deepak, but I think Mark Andrews could be the one who really benefits. And like you talked about with the double-digit tight ends, double-digit touchdowns, I think that's in the range of outcomes for Andrews. Andrews is also just like a stud and a talent, and we don't have to convince ourselves on his talent. But I'm curious, Billy, when we're approaching the big money drafts, how do you view him structurally? Because I think that there's an argument to be made that, especially in a 20-man format, if I take Mark Andrews, I'm done at tight end and for 12 rounds, because I have such an anchor where in some of these tight end premium formats, we're going to ask Kupp his thoughts on some of these tight end 2s, but I have to kind of make up for it in volume. Like even in best ball, Billy, that team we built where we had a 4 tight end build, if we took Mark Andrews, that's another spot we could go wide receiver or running back. So is there a structural advantage to pushing him up to the 1-2 turn in an FFPC main event draft?
Yeah, I think that's where he belongs in redraft. In best ball, you can get away with punting the position and doing the volume approach like we did, where we take 4. I think taking 4 in redraft is a disadvantage and sets you back. especially because there's going to be some outstanding tight ends that are on the waiver wire that could potentially find themselves in the mix, starting positions and seeing significant target share during the season. Like last year, for instance, Trey McBride and Greg Dulcich didn't even go drafted in a lot of FFPC drafts and didn't see the field until about week 6, I believe, with Dulcich. And then he kind of burst onto the scenes. And so anytime that you are able to pick up a tight end of that caliber off the waiver wire, I think it's doing yourself a disservice to take 4 in a redraft format. So I think that it's definitely a good strategy to lock in a Andrews or a Kelsey in round 1. I am fine taking Andrews in round 1 in tight end premium, and then just kind of forgetting the position until you get to like the next tier, like the Laportas and maybe the Everetts, where you can even argue the Irv Smiths. You're shooting for upside with these guys that have a ceiling when you already have your rock at the tight end position. And if you can flex that guy on any other given week, then great, you won. But worst case scenario, you're throwing him in on bye weeks or if Andrews gets hurt. I honestly don't normally like to do this, but in this scenario, particularly in Baltimore, I like actually handcuffing him with Likely, just because if we do see him go out and the Likely is climbing right now, but if we do see Andrews go, Likely is just not going to skip a beat. He's going to come right in. And I think Likely also has standalone value because he could potentially be the number 3 option any given week inside of the passing game for Baltimore, as they use him kind of out wide as a jumbo receiver. And so I think that Likely has some intriguing upside. And if you don't like to go that approach, you could, hedge and go just Likely builds against Andrew teams. And if there is ever an injury to Andrews, then forget about it. You're going to have a major advantage over the field.
Dude, that's what I'm talking about with the injury. Sorry to jump in, but that's what I was talking about with the account for injuries, is that if you have Dallas Goedert as your tight end and he gets hurt, there's no tight end handcuff. We saw it last year. You couldn't start any of those guys. It just AJ Brown went from 8 targets to 8.8. That's what happens when that guy gets hurt, right? With Mark Andrews, as you pointed, Isaiah Likely in the 2 games they played last year, 8.3 targets per game, scored twice, doesn't block on any pass plays. That's Theo, that with talking with you guys and Dan Williamson and the whole gang, you know what I mean? The whole gang. That I love the pass blocking stat because it can be extrapolated out to usage later on. It's how we found Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews blocked on 1 pass play last year. Oh, it's the best. But Isaiah Likely, his 2.6% pass block percentage was like nothing. And he played 81% of his snaps at wide receiver. So Andrews goes out, he immediately goes into my lineups, Billy. Not like just directly in. I have no fear of doing that. But Dawn F asked in the chat, like him and Kolar, do they emerge and hurt Andrews? I don't think so. And you would need multiple wide receiver injuries. Now I'm adding Likely because he plays wide receiver, but an Andrews injury is really what you need.
Yeah, and he's kind of like a big, slow wide receiver. Like Billy and I have talked about Isaiah Likely as a value, especially in best ball. And you talked about Odell Beckham, Rashad Bateman, guys that we have missed time with injuries. I think if one of them goes down, I think Likely is going to see spikes. And Andrew,
I honestly don't even think it's going to take an injury. I think Likely is just good enough to where
in the 20-man tight end premium. Yeah, you're right, dude.
Exactly. And then I think regardless of the new system, they still have 2 athletic tight ends. They're probably going to still run quite a bit of 12 personnel just because of the athleticism of both tight ends. And let's face it, Bateman hasn't been the model of health. Odell Beckham is past his prime. They may say, forget about it. Let's just roll 2 tight ends because these are our 2 best players on the receiving core and continue that route. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but it's a real possibility in the season.
I also want to add in, have you seen the Jerry curl mustache combo that Isaiah Likely is rocking this year?
Incredible swag. It's incredible swag.
Move him up. If you haven't seen it yet, pull up the pictures and you'll be like, yeah, this is a guy I need to be taking with my last pick.
There's 2% more target share right there.
Adjust your ranks, everyone.
Adjust the ranks. Dude.
And so, Andrew, you had a really interesting. We interacted on Twitter. This is months back, but I think this is an interesting one. What are a couple of tight end combos that you could see both finishing inside of the top 24? Like, I think it's a really interesting process, and this is off show sheet, but your Isaiah Likely talk, we'll throw Baltimore in there. We think a very likely scenario, finishes inside of the top 24. Give me a couple other tight end combos that you think could thrive together.
Absolutely. And I love how Billy pointed out, and anyone that knows, I don't like complimenting Billy. So he has to say something really, really thought-provoking for me to say that. So good job, Billy. I love how you said draft Mark Andrews and then forget about it, but don't forget completely, right?
Yep.
Especially in the 20-team tight end premium, you should be grabbing as many guys as possible. And my advice to anyone in a format like that is lean into your strengths, right? Like if you hate tight end, draft too early and then don't do anything, right? But me, I'm contractually obligated to find these guys, so I'm always thinking about it. So it doesn't make sense for me in a single tight end league to draft a Kelsey or whatever. But when I look at the New England Patriots, surprisingly enough, they're trying to replicate the offense from 2011 when Bill O'Brien was last calling the plays here, right? It's pretty clear. I mean, every part of it is worse, but they're trying to create the same thing, right? Like Tom Brady is Mac Jones is Tom Brady. I know, bear with me here. Hunter Henry is Rob Gronkowski as the inline role, and Mike Gesicki is Aaron Hernandez as the move
On or off the field. On or off the field.
I would imagine. Have you seen Mike Gesicki gritty? That dude does not have a stone to murder somebody. No.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify that because it was confusing.
Sorry to confuse everybody. And then Wes Welker. So that year, Wes Welker is going to be Juju Smith-Schuster, which people think that Wes Welker was just a slot guy, but Welker, Edelman, Jacoby Myers, these guys played flanker and slot. It's slot and 3 wide receiver sets, flanker and 2. They don't come out, right? So that's the game. That year, Rob Gronkowski as the inline tight end finished as the tight end 1 overall. And Aaron Hernandez as the move tight end finished as the tight end 3 overall. And that happened while Wes Welker got over 170 targets, over 170. Like the missing part of the equation is obviously Tom Brady, but they don't have to be tight end 1 and tight end 3 and a wide receiver 1 to have value in these FFPC leagues, where I love you guys are partnered with FFPC because like your listeners should know that they should get on there and play those. And if you win, put that in your Twitter profile, because you put in your Twitter profile, I want a high stakes FFPC league. You're gold plated now, baby. Right? Like that is like one of the coolest things that you can do. So
Billy and I only have enough space to write in our profile all the FFPC leagues we've taken down this week.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. You guys have too many accolades, right?
Shout out to Elon Musk. Give us a little extra room.
Yeah,
want to pick your brain, on a really polarizing player. Not really. He's an incredible player, Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah.
This is a 2 tight ends finishing inside the top 24, I would imagine, unless there's an injury. But how high can Dalton Kincaid finish? I am higher on Dalton Kincaid than most at Player Profiler right now. I think he's going to smash. I think the top 8 tight end numbers are in the range of outcomes. And it's not really that big of a jump. He's being drafted as tight end 12, tight end 11, tight end 13 in most drafts.
Yeah, and that's first of all, I love that you guys said you're going to come on and ask me about other positions, and then
this is the last one.
I was able to steer this directly into just talking about tight ends. Right?
I was waiting.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm good, man. Like this is my favorite topic.
You're typecasted.
I do this all the time, though. Like
in our defense, we have kind of talked about jumbo X receiver / tight ends last time.
I always steer it towards the same. We would have got here anyway. You didn't think we were talking about Patriots tight ends today? 100%. I was going to get us there one way or another. So, but yeah, Dalton Kincaid, man. Here's the thing. I'm the one that always pours the cold water on the rookies. Always. But that's the thing that I do because I've done all the research on where and when it can happen. So this year, when I turn around and say, hey, we not only have 1, but potentially 3 guys, not just 2, Billy. Move it to 3. 1 that I truly 2.5. I think 2.5 is right. It might not even be 0.5, honestly, but the conditions are potentially there where we need. Here's why it's so hard. And we actually had Jake Budd on our show yesterday. Check that out at Fantasy Alarm after you finish watching this. But he came in and basically summarized all the research that I found myself, which is that not only is it a 2-part position where you need to learn the blocking schemes and the pass catching schemes, but you need to be the best pass catching tight end in that room, because it's not like wide receiver where they look and say, you 3 are our best guys. You're all going to be out there. With tight end, a lot of times it's, okay, this guy's better at blocking. This guy's better at pass catching. So if Zach Ertz is there, Dallas Goedert has to play inline for a long time. Even if Jimmy Graham is there, Cole Kmet has to be the blocking tight end, right? So that's the first thing. You got to be the best pass catcher on your team, which isn't that easy as a rookie because every team always has incumbent players. Like it's very rare to just say, "Oh, we're going to replace this guy with a rookie." The other part is then you need to be a top 2 target on the team, like we talked about. So you need them to not have wide receivers. The odds of a Kyle Pitts being drafted as a tight end to play wide receiver that you could start at tight end to a team that doesn't have wide receivers. It's just that when you say it like that, it doesn't ever happen, right? Evan Ingram needed Odell Beckham Jr. to blow his knee out week 3 or 4 just to get there. So this situation with Dalton Kincaid, where he walks into a team where Gabe Davis didn't really do much, Dawson Knox is the inline tight end. He could play slot right away. And I watched a 30, 31, and 32-year-old Cole Beasley get back-to-back 100 target seasons on this team. And if that's not enough, Brandon Beane on Pat McAfee's show straight up said, this guy's playing wide receiver. He said, these guys are going to play at the same time. Dawson Knox is a tight end. This guy plays wide receiver. And I was like, I turned to Brandon Beane on my YouTube screen here, just like, Tim Robinson. I'm like, exactly, dude. Like I'm sitting here, like I was part of the interview. Exactly. I swear I yelled it when I was watching that. So for Kincaid, for me, it's wheels up. And here's the thing that people are hung up on. We don't care about floor. Tight end 12. Why would we care? The difference from tight end 7 to tight end 15 last year was 13 points. The year before that, the difference from tight end 8 to tight end 11 was less than 1 point in PPR. Those guys are lying all over the ground. You can go get Billy's best friend, Tyler Higbee, at any point you want. He's just out there, right? So take a shot at upside. And then if he's a complete bust, I'll fix it. Follow me on Twitter. I promise you I will fix it. We'll find somebody. A tight end has come from outside the top 17 in ADP 6 years in a row to finish top 5 at tight end. We're going to find that guy too. But Dalton Kincaid is a guy I'm willing to take a shot on. Absolutely.
Yeah, the Tunyons and the Schultzes, they appear every single year.
And the
You're absolutely
Wallers
right
and
about
the Andrews and
Yep.
Eric Ebron and Evan Ingram twice, right? It's like Logan Thomas, like they're
Yep.
out there, man.
every year. Let's pivot over to non-tight ends. Andrew, you are a talented analyst, not only for tight ends, so we're going to pick your brain. But one question Billy and I have been asking every single person that's come on the show, and we'll leave tight end out of the equation on this one. If there's one player that you could know their final stats for among anybody in fantasy, one player that maybe has the biggest range of outcomes or could really open things up for a teammate. A lot of analysts have taken this many different ways, but we've had some incredibly interesting answers here. Who is your guy for this one?
Oh my goodness. So I can know his stat line at the end
Any
of the
single player. You're Biff Tannen.
Can't use a tight end though.
Can't use a tight end.
Yeah, that would be cheating. Any single player.
So I'll say mine has been continually Deshaun Watson.
Yeah,
because
that was awesome.
Quarterback 9 in ADP, and if I knew that he was going to return to old Watson, I would wait every draft and just draft him. We've had people give a number of answers. Billy, maybe you could share a couple guys that you've talked about.
Yeah, one of the ones is Kadarius Toney for me.
Oh
right?
yeah, that's a good one, dude.
We'd be able to know pretty much the pecking order of all of the receivers, knowing that final stat line.
God, he's so exciting when he's healthy, man. I just can't help think about that Giants versus Cowboys game when he just put Trevon Diggs on skates all game. Like that was crazy, man. I was watching that game. I was like, there's no way this guy isn't good, right?
Yeah, he's good. Yeah. He just can't stay on the field.
Yeah, this one's kind of a cop out. But if I'm trying to get as much information as possible, the guy I would pick Brock Purdy as my guy.
Let's go.
Because if Brock Purdy doesn't, so if the stats are awesome, now it confirms that I can take Christian McCaffrey in the first round, right? And just the fact that Brock Purdy is starting over Trey Lance makes me feel a lot better about Christian McCaffrey, right? Because McCaffrey, mobile quarterbacks, we know mathematically they're not good for running backs, right? Especially pass catching backs. They're good for yards per carry, which is nice, but I don't play any like 5x5 fantasy baseball leagues where there's individual stat categories. I just care about fantasy. So that's one where you get that information. You get the touchdown total. It gives you info on Kittle, the total yards for Debo and the other guys. And what if that line comes up and it's 0? Then I'm drafting Trey Lance in every league. And then get the rug pulled on me by Sam Darnold probably. But still, Like just and think about where Purdy goes in ADP. You can get him in every single league, right? Like, what if he's just like he's next Tom Brady? That one, I feel like there's so many ways you could play it. Even if, because some guys like take Billy's line. If Kadarius Toney, we look at the line that he has 200 yards, then we know he got hurt again. But if Brock Purdy's line is 100 yards, then we know that there's actionable data there still.
I love that one. That's a really thought out question, even though it wasn't on the show sheet. That was really good stuff, Coop. Now, guys, I really want to get into our flag plants, and I'd like you guys to each share a player or two that at each position. We're going to leave tight end out of this, and we're going to go with. We'll start out with quarterback. I'd like you to share your flag plant players that you think can help win leagues, and also give me a value. So, Billy, we'll start with you. Who is a quarterback that you are flag planting for this season?
Russell Wilson, pretty easily for me. Finished last year as quarterback 18 in fantasy points per game. He's being drafted around quarterback 18 still in drafts. I just think that he's being drafted at his absolute floor. We can expect a bounce back season with the new offense with Sean Payton in town. It's going to rebuild his confidence. Now he has all of his weapons on the field. Last year, we didn't really see all three, Greg Dulcich, Jerry Jeudy, and Cortland Sutton all on the field at the same time. We also know that Javonte, is coming back off of surgery. Deepak just said that he doesn't really want much to do with him in the beginning outside of his, cheap cost. But that probably means that they're going to let Russ throw the ball a little bit more early. And if that successful, we can probably expect him to cook all season, and it's going to benefit him as where he's going in drafts, and then also all of his surrounding weapons with Jeudy, Sutton, and Greg Dulcich. We have a pretty consolidated target tree now as well, and I think that that's going to benefit him. And of course, they drafted Mims, who's going to add some speed to this team as well. So love Russell Wilson this year at cost, and one of my flag plants.
For the listeners and the people watching out there, this is how Billy and Theo treat their guests. First, they ask me a question that's not even on the sheet, and then Billy steals my answer for quarterback. So that's how they do it, man. They keep you guessing.
We also have mute buttons. Look, see, try to say something.
The disrespect to mute your guests, Billy.
You can't even say it.
Yeah, unbelievable, dude. Unbelievable. So no, I love the Russ pick, man. He was QB 15 last year, even though it was awful, and he finished QB 15, and now he's going off at QB 18. So you're talking about the floor. That it's lower than the floor, right? Great. Yeah. So I'm in on that one. I'll give you another one here that I've been convinced on, and I'm willing to go there, especially in single QB leagues. It's Anthony Richardson, right? And
we got to mute him again.
No, leave me.
No, I love this.
Yes. It's super high risk, high reward. You have no. It's like watching Billy bowl, which I was able to bowl with him at the FSGA. It's like at any given moment, you have no idea what you're going to get. You don't even know if you're worried about your safety. Balls are flying everywhere. Pins aren't really being hit, but you could get hit by something. But Anthony Richardson, this is why I love him in single QB leagues. At QB 11, I'm willing to take him as my first and only quarterback. And what's scaring people is the possibility that he might not start. But there are so many safe guys there after him. So talk about the top 12 QBs. If I take him at QB 11, I just come back. I could double tap Kirk Cousins, Daniel Jones, Geno Smith, Aaron Rodgers, Jared Goff, Russell Wilson, Derek Carr. It's not a problem. They're everywhere, right? And the thing about the mobile quarterback that I think gets lost in the sauce a bit is that we care. Like we look at the upside, and obviously the upside is what everyone thinks about, but the floor of the mobile quarterback is super underrated in that if you have a guy running for 40, 50 yards, even just 40, 50, like a Daniel Jones even, then that's 5 points, right? And especially in those 4-point passing leagues, it doesn't really matter as much to me. But if you have a QB that runs for 50 yards and a touchdown, that's 11 points right there before you even factor in any passing. And we expect every quarterback except for, Kendall Hinton to do at least some passing in a game, right? Even, Taysom Hill and Tebow, like Tim Tebow, go back and look at those games. He was a QB1 for the second half of that season just because the floor is so good. So Anthony Richardson, I'm willing to just go there. And if I have to start, how awful would it be for me to have to start back-to-back MVP Aaron Rodgers? It's like, it's not that hard to find a QB to start. So I'm willing to go crazy with Anthony Richardson.
I love both of your answers, and I think that the Anthony Richardson double quarterback double tap has been a really great way to play, especially in the 20 man rosters. In an FFPC competitor draft the other day, you like how I did that, Billy? FFPC competitor draft the other day, I was able to take Dak and Anthony Richardson, and they both fell. For me, you brought up Daniel Jones. That's one guy I'm flag planting. He's going lower than Richardson, but last year Jones had 700 yards rushing. He also, like, they add Waller. They add all these guys that I think are going to be chain movers to the offense. I think people make fun of all these slot receivers, but I think Dable has a design there, and I think they're going to be able to move the sticks a lot. I think Jones's rushing upside and the ability to double tap quarterback with him as well. I love it. And then to take another flag plant, a guy that's going higher is Justin Herbert right now. I've taken him in a lot of leagues. You're having to use premium draft capital, but QB1 overall is not out of the range of outcomes just based on the fact that he might throw so many touchdown passes this year. I think that the Kellen Moore addition, the fact that they add Quentin Johnston, I love the fact that he's got Parham as his backup tight end to go with Gerald Everett. They have so much size at the wide receiver position, and they have Austin Eckler as well. I think this might be the Justin Herbert year. I think he's a fantastic value. How about running back? Kupp, give me like your flag plant, and also give me a value running back.
You might as well use Richardson because he can't throw the ball.
Oh, unbelievable! I don't even care if he throws the ball, to be honest, dude.
Give me 1,100 yards rushing, and he can throw like 12 touchdown passes. And
don't care, dude. Justin Fields, dude. Justin Fields, they throwing the fewest passes per game since 2003 Steelers or whatever. He was still QB1, so that's why I don't care, Billy, and shut up. So and also let me add, shut up. But I love the Justin Herbert call, man. His ADOT, if you sort it by any quarterbacks that played even 4 or 5 games, he was outside the top 32, right? Like, it's just ridiculous, the Joe Lombardi dink and dunk nonsense going on there. For running back, my flag plant is Miles Sanders. I talked about the mobile QB. If you take all the articles that have been written, Scott Barrett's on the value of a target versus a carry. If you take Andrew Erickson's on how mobile quarterbacks affect the game. I'm a student of the game. I keep like a list of all these articles that like I think are some of the best ever. Theo, you've written some. Billy, you've not.
First class fantasy guess. You're just dropping first class fantasy guess.
Yeah, it's a great show, man. Like if you look at Jalen Hurts last year, people think that good line RPO, it's good for the running back, and it is for yards per carry. But Jalen Hurts is the second most carries inside the red zone of any QB of any player, behind only Jamal Williams, and also that team threw the fewest passes of any team to the running back. And I even went and looked at Doug Peterson. This is a stat that I shared a couple times, but Doug Peterson in 2019, between just Miles Sanders and Boston Scott, threw 39 screen passes, right? Last year, Boston Scott and Miles Sanders played more snaps than they did in 2019. Guess how many screen passes those two combined for? Just take a wild guess. 39 in 2019.
Between Boston Scott and who?
Miles Sanders.
The combined for
screen passes last year.
Combined for 17.
6.
Oh my God.
6. He's just not part of the playbook. Dallas Goedert got like 19 himself. They just don't do it. So I'm willing to take the risk on a guy going to a new team. There's a video of Scott Fitter out there saying, remember the time you caught 50 passes? Wasn't that awesome? Let's do that again. Right. Like on video. And so when I see that, I'm like, yeah, let's get it going. The floor is low, but who cares in that range, right? I think that Miles Sanders could potentially have the best season that he's ever had. And then for a late guy, this is kind of a boring pick, but it fits well, in my opinion, into a 0 RB strategy. We have to get guys who could start and also go for upside. The guy that I'm willing to start, honestly, week 1, and people do hate this take because there are a lot of people that love Dameon Pierce, but Devin Singletary, man, I look at. Yeah, we're in. All right, let's go. So Devin Singletary ran the 5th most routes of any running back if you count playoffs, 6 if you don't. He is a solid pass blocker. And Dameon Pierce graded outside the top 120 running backs in pass blocking per Pro Football Focus. And people come to me and they say, oh, who cares about Pro Football Focus? Well, the offensive coordinator for the Texans, Bobby Slowick, worked for Pro Football Focus for 3 years. So he actually probably does care a little bit about what that data says. He's probably very familiar with that data, in fact, which is why you go and bring in a pass down back like Devin Singletary. And if this team is going to be as bad as the Vegas odds and everyone say, then they're probably going to have to lean on the pass catching back a little bit, right? So running with a guy like Dameon Pierce, running is the luxury of the winning team oftentimes. So I think Devin Singletary right from the rip is going to get a couple targets a game, and that'll keep my zero RB teams afloat while I go out and find my league winner off the wire or wherever else. So Devin Singletary is a guy at his ADP, I mean, free, right? RB 50 or so from what I've seen, FFPC and on Underdog and stuff like that. So pretty easy.
I like that. I've been drafting a ton of him on Underdog. He seems to be like the last like clear role running back a lot of times in this Underdog draft. So I really like that one. Billy, how about you? Let's flag plant and give me a value.
Flag plant. I am going to say, oh man, there's so many backs this year that I really like. The one I was flag planting earlier that I've kind of cooled my jets on has been Ramondre Stevenson, but he continues to be kind of safe in terms of running backs being added. If they add a back here, that's out the window. But Ramondre Stevenson saw the third most targets at the running back position in the NFL last year. We expect to have Mac Jones checking down again this year. Ramondre Stevenson also was pretty explosive last year. You heavily utilized in the goal line. Was pretty much the offense ran through him all season last year, and I don't expect that to change here in 2023. If they add a back, this is out the window. But as of now, he continues to look like he is going to be safe, at least for the time being. A value that I really like late in drafts. Unfortunately, he just pulled his hamstring this week, but somebody who I think is going to have a pretty massive workload is Jerome Ford. We look at what the Browns have done in the history when they have had multiple backs here, and they have never given Chubb the full workload. Although I do believe they give him more this year without Hunt there. I think that Jerome Ford probably steps into a pretty sizable role. That was kind of reaffirmed by them sitting him out in the preseason in the Hall of Fame game, showing they're protecting him and his health going into the season. Unfortunate hamstring pull, but he'll get to rest that going into week 1. And then when he's on the field, I do expect to see him, utilized much more than where he's been going in drafts. So pretty safe to say he'll probably see 28 to 30% of the rushing share. He'll probably be utilized a little bit more in the passing game than people are expecting. People say that he wasn't a pass catcher in college, but a lot of people weren't ever utilized in college as pass catchers because they're not given the opportunity, and the offense didn't work that way. NFL is a different ball game, and he has the ability to be a pass catcher. So I think that Jerome Ford is a pretty good value late in drafts.
So for me, a guy I've been flag planning for a while now is Cam Akers. I think we saw how good he was to end last season, and I think that he has some unknown upside as a pass catcher. We referenced Tyler Higbee. We talked about Cooper Kupp earlier with Deepak. I think we could see him more targeted this year, and I think based on the players behind him, they have a huge role in mind for him. Right now, his competition is 6th round and 7th round draft picks. I think Cam Akers is going to get about as much as he can handle. I think he's a dark horse to have more running back touches than any other running back over like the first month of the season. I think they might really, really lean on him. And last year, he kind of survived everything. He was supposed to get cut. He was supposed to get traded. And he ends up finishing out the year and posting like 4 100-yard or more rushing games. I'm in on Akers. I think he's a great value, especially where he's going right around running back 20. And then I have a number of values. I mean, Billy and Andrew both talked about like the zero RB strategy this year. And I think one of the main reasons is because, these guys are getting pushed down. And I think when I look at Devon Achane for a pure upside pick for me, right around running back 37, I think he's a guy who could beat his ADP by 13 spots, 14 spots. I think he's going to have a lot of spike weeks. I think he's got receiving ability. He has lightning in a bottle speed, and this is a head coach that we have seen be able to get guys out in space and get impactful weeks from them. So I'm really big on Devon Achane. I drafted him in the 10th round this week. I think by the time we draft, like at the end of the month, I think he's an 8th rounder in a lot of these leagues. I think the market will kind of correct itself because right now, like he dropped because of the Dalvin Cook rumors, and Cook's not going to end up in Miami, I don't think. So I'm in on Achane. I'm also in on AJ Dillon. AJ Dillon going many spots lower than he was last year. This is a young quarterback. I think they're going to lean a little bit more on the running game. There's some contingent upside if Aaron Jones misses time. I know Billy is very big on Aaron Jones, and I think if Aaron Jones stays healthy, I think Billy's going to be proven right. But Aaron Jones has been very fortunate with injuries. He's also been propped up by playing with Aaron Rodgers. We don't know how Jordan Love is going to look with Aaron Jones, and I think that Aaron Jones is also getting a little bit older. We're talking about a 28-year-old back. So I'm in on Dylan and A-Chain as my values this year. Kupp and Billy, and now I want to pick your brain on your wide receivers. We'll start with Kupp here. Give us a flag plant wide receiver. Go as high as you want. Any portion of the draft, the guy you really, really want.
So actually, I'll do a guy. I'll bring up a guy quick. And Billy, I know you got to jump, don't you? So did you want to go first? Or did you actually got to run now?
No, we can. Let's go ahead and wrap it up.
Yeah. Apologies. Let's do lightning round for this.
Okay. Yeah. So for me, real quick one, and it's easy to go lightning round on this because if you want my full take on the player, it's in the player profiler draft guide. I popped in and did a player as I like to do. So you can get my full take video and write up on DK Metcalf and why I believe that just like Mike Evans, when they had Deshaun Jackson and brought in Chris Godwin for a couple of years, Mike Evans never stopped being the split end on that team. And I don't think DK Metcalf is going to stop being the split end for the Seahawks and all the good that comes with it. So I think DK Metcalf is a guy that you can get a little discount on him because the rookie and all that, but he's going to potentially be not even just the DK Metcalf of last year, but he breaks a few more tackles and we could have the DK Metcalf that finished RB7. Not a lot of difference between DK Metcalf and AJ Brown besides the broken tackles and the extra yak that came with that. And back in, a couple years ago, DK Metcalf broke 17 tackles just like AJ Brown did last year. So could easily see it happen.
Kupp, you crushed it in the draft kit. We're going to save Billy and my flag plant wide receivers for next week. Kupp, you were awesome. Let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, hit me. It's easy. Follow me on Twitter at Coupe Fiasco. I tweet everything out that I do. So I'll retweet this, all my articles that are on Fantasy Alarm, and you can catch me every morning 9 to 9:30 on Better Sports Network, where we do a little debate show. Me and Corey Parson and Britt Flynn and Howard Bender, and we just kind of yell at each other for a half hour. And then on Better Sports Network, I'm on from 1 to 3. I've got my own show, Coop's FF Fiasco, which both you guys now have to come on because I came on your show. That's on Mondays and Fridays, but every day from 1 to 3, I'm on some sort of show there. So you can catch me most days, and all my articles, they live on Fantasy Alarm. So I make it kind of easy.
Yeah, definitely follow Kupp. Look for all his work. It's fantastic. I have Scott Barrett on press coverage tomorrow on Friday. Make sure and check that one out. That's going to be really, really good. And then check out Billy and I. We dropped 2 guests today. Next week on First Class Fantasy, we have a really special one. We're going to have a high-stakes spin. We have Fantasy Mojo, Darren Armani, who drops probably the best ADP content anywhere in fantasy. He's going to be joining us, and then we're going to be joined by the GOAT, the greatest fantasy player, the most successful fantasy player of all time, Chad Schroeder. He's going to be stepping on First Class Fantasy, so a really great high-stakes show. Everybody enjoy the rest of their day. Thanks again to Kupp. Thanks again for Dr. Deepak Chona. And everybody, we will see you soon.